Welcome to the Nunn Report, bringing your regular dose of truth, freedom, and weirdness. With your host, Dann Nunn.
Thanks for tuning into this special guest edition of the Nunn Report. Today we have someone probably not many of you have heard of who happens to be very knowledgeable in something important to all of us. That is the impact of the movement towards zero bail policies across America. He is a bail attorney who graduated from law school in 1989 and has argued cases before the Texas Supreme Court and the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, among others. Today's show will focus around the zero bail debate, criminal justice, and the impact it has on society at large. So let's get down to it and welcome a Texas bail attorney and board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, Ken Good. Ken, thanks for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I apologize for the suit. I just came out of court.
Yeah, it's all right, man. We cover the whole thing. I've got a T-shirt and you've got a suit, and so we should appeal to a very large demographic, right?
That's right.
Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came? You've been in law for 30 plus years. How you came to be focused on the bail reform issue, and maybe kind of educate us a little bit on what that really is.
Well, I don't think I've ever said this before, but if I was going to say, if you really want to know about my background, you would have to start with my grandfather, who was a sharecropper. So, my story is the story of so many different people in the United States. The story of hard work, you can get ahead. And so my parents were public school teachers. They taught me and my siblings the importance of an education. And so I decided, after watching Perry Mason late at night with my mom, that I wanted to be an attorney. And so I went to law school and graduated and became an attorney. I started out representing doctors and hospitals when they got sued. I've always had an interest in appellate work, so I've always kind of had a legal issues-minded kind of practice. And so I got approached to help a bondsman on some default judgments, which is a technical term, but so I was successful in helping him with that. And so that kind of started my traveling down the road representing bondsmen. I now am Texas counsel for several corporations. I represent bondsmen across the state of Texas. And how I became interested in the bail reform movement is I was asked to attend a hearing in Harris County in the case of O'Donnell versus Harris County. And it was early in the case, and I sat in the hearing, and it was very evident that the judge was going off track, or what I considered to be off track, and that the case was going to go south from what I considered to be the proper result. And so I started calling my sources, my contacts, saying, look, we need to get involved in this movement because this case is going to set bad precedent and it's going to go really bad. And not only did it go bad, that case has now been reversed 5, 6 or more times. Judge Rosenthal, who was the judge in that court, has been reversed so many times in that one case. It's ridiculous. And so I would say my prediction came true. Bad result, and it was ultimately overturned. And ultimately, the Fifth Circuit said that case should have never been filed in federal court. So you're seeing this push for reforms across the country, and they're by this one law firm, by this one activist group, saying the Constitution needs to mandate what they do. Well, that's not even what the Constitution does. It sets a floor, and then every jurisdiction can do anything they want over that floor. Well, what they want is they want to mandate what certain practices are, not set a floor. And so that's really what we're having. We're having a floor that's really not. It's not from the Constitution. That law firm is now 0 and 5 at the Court of Appeals. They've lost every time at the U.S. Supreme Court, and they have 2 cases pending there right now. But they're still making the same arguments. No matter how many times they lose them, they still make the same argument that they're right, and even though they keep losing.
Well, that sounds familiar. I hear that a lot from the podium in the White House nowadays. They keep making the same arguments, and
yeah. Well, you can make a big argument or analogy between immigration policy and bail reform policy. It has a lot of the same wackadoodles.
Yeah. So the role of bail in the criminal justice system, I think that most of us understand it in general, but unless we've actually experienced it from one side of the law or the other, maybe a little bit about, what is the role of it in the criminal justice system? Basically someone gets caught for a crime. The judge says, hey, it's going to cost you this much to get out. You can go to a bail bondsman and basically finance your bond for a percentage of the fee or something like that? Is that how it works?
It's just like any insurance product. So the bond amount, whatever they set the bail is the amount of insurance that you need. And so you're paying a premium, just like when you buy a 30,000 insurance policy on your car or a $100,000 insurance policy on your car. You're buying an insurance policy to the court saying that you will appear. But I think, bail has been around for 200 years or more. And I like to explain to people that bail is the grease that keeps the conveyor belt of the criminal justice system moving, because every year, on average, the same number of cases get added to the conveyor belt. And if we don't resolve the same number or more, then the backlog before the court gets worse. And we're experiencing a huge backlog right now because of COVID. Nothing happened for a couple of years. And so all courts have a backlog. And because of the backlog, their jails are absolutely full of really dangerous people. And now on top of that, we have this push for let's just let them out on their own promise, because, everybody wants to come to court. Everybody wants to resolve their cases. We don't need bondsmen. And what we are finding out all over the country is that if you don't have the private industry, which has all these incentives to get people to court and all these penalties if they don't, then absolutely you get rid of accountability, you create chaos. And that if you create chaos, the backlog gets so bad, they have to de facto decriminalize crime because, they have to get rid of cases. So they dismiss them, which is in effect decriminalization. So the grease that keeps the criminal justice system moving is actually so much more important than people realize. It's the whole concept of accountability. Without that, you have chaos. And
and that's what it seems like. I mean, because you see this move toward zero bail policies for criminals. It seems like another move in the direction of a society without accountability or consequences for actions. Like you said, I mean, that's from when I grew up. That was how you learned, what was okay to do and what was not, was by being accountable and having consequences. We come from a generation where the family unit was important, where, the law was laid down at home, and hopefully that baton was passed as you go throughout life. But as you said, this just seems to sow chaos. And do you see a lot of these people that are released without bail? Do they go out and reoffend a lot of the time?
Yes. And, that's one of the big issues in debate right now. And we call that recidivism. So there's a study out of California that was done by Yolo County, by the DA's office there. And he found that people released on these zero bail policies, simple release policies, they have a 200% greater chance of committing a violent offense in the next 18 months compared to someone who is released on a private surety bond. So if you're released on a bail bond, then you just have so much more accountability. And without it, then people are going to be, the studies from COVID are showing that it jeopardizes public safety. This seems like common sense to me. I don't understand the argument that would be in favor of this, but obviously there is one, or we wouldn't be talking about it. What is the argument they use in favor of this? Because it seems like it would increase crime, or at least it might increase certain types of crime. But some say it doesn't. Some say, oh no, this is what we need to do. This is how we move society forward. What's their argument? Let me make a couple of points on that. Number one, you can go all the way back to California and you can trace the evolution of this releasing people from jail. And it really didn't have anything to do about whether it was going to increase crime. It started out with, your jail is so overcrowded, you can't provide sufficient medical care. So we're going to order you to release a certain percentage of the people in jail.
I remember that. And
that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the minority at that time said, we cannot get involved in regulating the day-to-day operations of criminal cases from the state. But that was the losing proposition then. But now that same group, plus a couple of new judges, are the majority. So I think if they were given the opportunity, they might reverse that case. And so I would say that's the first thing. These policies didn't have anything to do when they started about reducing crime. It was all about, we have a problem with overcrowding the jail, and we don't have the political will to build new jails. So we're going to release people. We're going to release people until the public decides they want to build more jails. Because I think we've kind of put the politicians in California in the box. They know what they're doing, but there's no political will on the left to do anything about it because you're going to dry up all your fundraising and somebody's going to run against you that's even harder to the left than you are. The second point I would make is we have this, I've been on a debate recently with this law firm who is pushing these policies, and the debate is, well, is crime really increasing, or is it just a perception that crime is increasing?
Right.
And they really went hard on no, look at all these national studies. Crime's not increasing. And Ken, you're everything you're saying is just a dog whistle for, the right. And it really kind of hurt my feelings. Probably that's the reason why I'm bringing it up, but I've thought about it a lot since then. And because of that, this is what I'd say. Of course, nationally, the crime statistics are either the same or coming down because by and large, the majority of the country is still following the tried and true methods of accountability for criminal justice. But where you have in some of our urban areas, especially in California or in San Francisco, especially, or you have New York that tried it, where you're trying in urban areas where they're trying it, it's been an absolute failure and crime is increasing. And look at Oakland, where the NAACP issued a letter in the last 3 months saying we need a state of emergency on crime. Look at San Francisco, where the Nancy Pelosi federal building, the government has come out and said, do not come to work. It's not safe for you to come to work in this neighborhood, work from home. And that's just going on. And then property values for commercial buildings are selling currently in San Francisco for 30% of their value or to up to 50% of the value that they were a year ago because of crime. And so I think this perception versus reality thing it's really the people that are making the arguments perception. They're flipping the statistics. They're relying upon all the areas of the country following tried and true methods of criminal justice to hold people accountable so that they can then argue, well, crime's really not increasing, but we feel your pain in the areas where it's really increasing.
We have the same issue. I'm from up in the Northwest here and raised in Seattle. And it's become quite a different city than it was. But we have the same problem at our courthouse. It's just not safe. In fact, for a while, they were telling employees, don't come into work because it's not safe. Or, if you do have to come in through the garage, don't come in through the front entrance because it just isn't safe. And you see this, of course, the major cities are worse. Seattle seems to be chasing San Francisco to become the worst.
Seattle's just terrible. I mean, you want to talk about Seattle. I mean, we've turned over setting records for not only murder, but suicides. I mean, isn't it Seattle that set a new record and we still have a month left? Yeah. All-time record of murders. Yes. But then they're also setting new records every month for suicides or overdoses. I mean, I wouldn't say suicide, from overdoses because they've deregulated or they've decriminalized all heavy drugs. And they did it with the argument, well, these people get help. No, they're not. They're setting new records of overdoses every month. People are lining up for their fentanyl dose every day. I mean, we have no way to force these people into treatment now. And so, I mean, what would we have done different if we were paid off by the cartels to do this so that they could just make money hand over fist?
Oh, yeah. And you combine that with the what amounts to basically an open border down there and the facilitation of human trafficking, sex trafficking, but also of the fentanyl, like you mentioned. And in Seattle, I mean, we have open drug dens on the streets. There's areas of downtown where you can literally walk for blocks and see nothing but black market sales. They're selling whatever they can. They're doing drugs right there on the street. They've got they stand there with the nods like you see the people. It's just so sad. It's such a waste of life. And so another thing that we've kind of seen that goes with the catch and release, if you will, is, and I don't know how to explain it. You're the expert. Is a movement toward only having people pay what they can afford to pay. Is that again because of overcrowding of jails and whatnot, or what?
Well, I mean, no, I think the argument when we hear the argument that you can't force somebody to pay more than they can afford, then that really is a push for the simple release methods. And so you've got all these people saying, well, the Constitution requires you cannot require them to pay more than they can afford. And that's just hogwash. I mean, that sounds so country when I say it, but your ability to pay is one consideration in setting bail, but it's only one. And if you have a criminal record and then the judge sets the bail at an amount that you cannot afford, well, then it's not just because you're poor, it's because you have a criminal record. And we have, like in Texas, I think in the United States, we have a whole bunch of cases. In Texas, we have a whole bunch of cases that say that setting bail at an amount you cannot afford is not a violation of, the Eighth Amendment or a right to bail. You have a right to a hearing asking the judge to reconsider what the bail amount is. You don't have a right to release. And that's the problem that we have. We have people who are arguing that you cannot require people to pay more than they say they can afford. And if you do, then you're violating the Constitution. That has been overturned. That has been reversed. That's never been the law, even though this same plaintiff's attorney group argues that it is, because you have a right to a hearing asking the judge to reconsider the amount of bond set, not to force the judge to release you. When you force the judge to release you, then you are tying their hands so that they can't address organized crime, career criminals, or gangs. And so that's what they want. They want all these things where we tie the hands of the judges and people cannot be held in jail. That's been rejected by the courts, and it will hopefully continue to be rejected by the courts because it's wrong, and it's not the Constitution. You may want to adopt that as a policy locally, like in California, but that's not the requirement of the federal Constitution.
Yeah, I grew up scared to death of going to jail, because I always thought, if you couldn't make bail, you just stayed in there and rotted, until trial. And it seems like now that's not so much the case, which again, to me, removes consequences for your actions. And why would anybody, if they're just going to get out anyway, to go out and do whatever it is they want to do, probably criminal activity again. Let's shift to some of the concerns in general and some of the causes. You've been in the criminal justice system for 33, 34 years, something like that, right?
Yeah. Showing my age right here.
Yeah. Well, I'm right up there too, trust me. But, and we touched on the homeless issue and the crisis that comes with that, the mental issues and the addiction issues. Fentanyl has become the drug of choice because it's inexpensive. It can be mixed with other things to make them more powerful. And it's readily available thanks to our open border and whatnot. So, with the drug activity and the mental illness comes the criminal element. These people, do you have like statistics on what is recidivism rate on these people? If they're released without bail, that they're not stable people. They're mentally ill. They're addicted to drugs. We're going to just put them back out on the streets. What are the chances of them landing right back in jail?
There was a study that was done by a group that interviewed a homeless population and found like 75% of them have mental health issues. And, the drug issues are rampant. And, it's like we're setting up an audience that is committed to buying your product, your fentanyl drug, and we're putting them all like downtown Portland. And we're just making it so easy for the drug cartels or the drug dealers to come right there and drop off their drugs and get their payments from everybody, no matter what they have to do to get them, whether they have to steal, whether they have to carjack, whether they have to prostitute their bodies. We're doing nothing about it. We're saying, well, those are just misdemeanors, or those are not really bad crimes anymore. Those are crimes against themselves. So we're just going to look the other way. We're not going to prosecute those anymore.
Well, it's kind of like gang violence, gang on gang crime. They kind of ignore that too.
We're giving up on a segment of our society. We're just giving up on these people. Used to be the criminal justice system was the last chance for these people to turn around and become productive citizens. Mm-hmm. For these crimes, we're just saying, no, you're not going to be productive. We're turning you over to the drug dealers, the cartels, the gangs, and we're not going to do anything. We have to. Look, there is hope. The hope here is the Sanchez versus Alabama case, because in Sanchez versus Alabama, they had to live under a preliminary injunction for 4 or 5 years, where they could not hold anybody, and they saw crime go up, crime go crazy, and then they won, and this law firm that got this judge, convinced them to enter this preliminary injunction that was in place for all those many years, was reversed and set aside, and they won the lawsuit. And so it took them 6 months to reinstate accountability, to change the mindset of the criminal, to say you either come to court or don't commit crime or there will be consequences. And they were successful in lowering their crime rate. Sanchez versus Alabama is the model for the rest of the country that is trying these hard left policies that are causing crime to increase. Go back to what works. You've got to reinstitute that these drugs are crimes so that you will now have leverage to get people to rehab. And if they don't go to rehab, then they go to jail. That's what leverage is. And also there's consequences for the drug dealers. You got to chase them out of the city. And so there is hope. The hope is the Sanchez versus Alabama model.
Okay.
That's what these areas need to do. And it's not like, what do we do? What do we do? We know what to do. We just refuse to do it in those areas.
Right. I mean, enforce the law. They keep saying, the immigration system is broken. Well, no, you've perverted it into something it was never meant to be. It's broken because you've allowed it to be broken. There is a legal method and a legal path to come into this country, which kind of brings me to what I want to talk about. You're being in Texas, it's a border state. And you have Paxton there, who thankfully is now back at his duties. And because I thought that was just an incredible injustice. Do you see a connection between what amounts to an open border with literally millions of people that have come into this country over just the past few years? Do you see a connection with that and any increased criminal activity in certain areas of Texas?
Yes, I actually moderated a panel in October of border sheriffs, and mostly border sheriffs and DEA agents and DPS. And it's just incredible. One of the points that was made to me that I had not thought about was, if you are running drugs across the border and you get stopped and they confiscate your drugs, you're still responsible for that amount of money to whoever gave them to you to get across the border. And so a lot of times these people are changing to running people because it's a lot more lucrative. They'll get across, they still owe the money. And so we're seeing a lot more concentration on smuggling people across, and that they have to, once they get across, they've got to pay back that money, whether it's running drugs or whether it's prostituting their body or whatever it takes for them, even participating in these shoplifting sprees and, just show up and grab everything you can and run. I think there's a lot more connection to that than we realize. And I'm just starting to come to realize that when you set up policies that tie the hands of judges so they can't address gangs, career criminals, or organized crime gangs, career criminals step into that void and figure out ways to make money hand over fist. You're seeing it all across the spectrum, whether it's a misdemeanor on Cadillac converter theft, where cartels or organized crime is making thousands of dollars on each one because of the minerals in there. And I think you're seeing these groups make money hand over fist in illicit ways because, what would we do? What would these political officials be doing differently if they were being paid off to do the bidding of organized crime? And I can't think of anything that they would be doing different that they're already doing.
I know it's unbelievable to me. It's really hard for me to wrap my mind around it. My show yesterday was on the border. It's an ongoing issue, so I cover it pretty regularly. But exactly what you said is the human trafficking aspect. There's a hole in the wall that they cut, and the border patrol does not control the border. The cartels do. Mm-hmm. The cartel is literally standing there helping people through this hole. The border agents are watching this happen. They can do nothing at all. The cartels are masked. They pull up in their SUVs. They dump all these people, and they're videotaping them as they're coming through the fence, and the proof of delivery, right? I think so that they can, because these people oftentimes aren't paying for their own transport. There's NGOs and other organizations out there that are paying for them to come across Mexico and get into the United States. So it was interesting to see these cartels literally videotaping these people entering the United States. I saw that as basically proof of delivery so that so they could get paid. And it staggers the imagination to even think that the current regime that's in power is facilitating this through their lack of action. And it's kind of an extension of what we were talking about with the bail policies that are being instituted in states and in countries or cities and counties, right?
Yeah, we see so much similarity between the two because, the people driving these policies are people that have a ton of money, and they're the people that are backing the candidates. And so, the quickest way for you to raise, like in Texas, I mean, I don't think people recognize that Texas has always been a conservative state. Even when it was a Democrat-controlled state, it was still conservative. But then the Democrats didn't have room for conservatives anymore. So Texas has been a Republican state. But then we have Democrats or Democrat candidates that run for statewide office. They have to take very left positions to raise money. But once they take those positions, they may be able to raise money, but they're no longer going to be able to be successful in a statewide election because Texas has historically been a conservative state. So they raise the money, but then they lose by 13 points. And so they could actually be competitive in Texas if they nominated a moderate or a conservative Democrat. They could win Texas with a conservative Democrat, but they would never be able to raise the money to be able to run because the people that have the money on that side of the spectrum will only support left policies or left positions. And so they're cutting themselves from being able to be competitive in Texas. And that's really the story on all these. You think the candidates on the left don't realize what's happening. They're willing. I mean, they know they're in a box, but they can't do anything about it because the money people that are contributing to their campaign will not contribute anymore. And they will have someone running against them in the next primary if they don't. So that's one of the arguments. Forget about all these identity politics issues. Forget about all these silly things. Just vote on, we've got to straighten out our criminal justice system. We got to straighten out our immigration policy. Until those two are straightened out, you're only going to vote for one party, the only party that's doing common sense issues on that. When you do that, and when they start winning elections, you'll see everybody come out of the box supporting those same policies. Until we do, that's the reason why we have all these identity politics coming out, because they're trying to poison their supporters to not support the opposite candidate because they can't, they hate what they're doing on those policies, but they want to make it where the right's identity is so bad that they no longer can vote for any reason. And we're not going to get any progress on these issues until we overcome that.
Yeah, because someone's got to have no ball. They say no balls, no blue chips. Someone's got to have the gonads to get up there and stand on those issues. Someone who impresses me is Vivek Ramaswamy. The guy came out of, he's not really out of nowhere. He's been a business person for a long time, but politically he's kind of out of nowhere. But he does stand on a lot of those policies, and he has positions and solutions that he's put forward along, towards fixing the border, towards criminal justice reform, towards the key issues of society that really, if you don't have law and order, you really don't have a functioning society, right?
Exactly right. There's a philosopher that says, if you take away law and order, people, when they get together, are just fighting to obtain each other's power. And the compromise when we came together as a society is the compromise was law and order, public safety. And when you decriminalize crime, if we start with misdemeanors and go up to felonies, you don't have public safety anymore. You don't have a safe place for you to live. You don't have a safe place for you to go to work. We're seeing that. And so until we get a handle on public safety, we're going to continue to have a deterioration of our society. And it will continue. It will continue until we reverse course. And the problem is, I think some of these groups that support criminal justice reform, that's what they want. They want to decriminalize crime. So anything that creates chaos, it gets them to the point of what they want.
Well, aren't we?
You have to recognize that.
Yeah, we're kind of slowly moving that way. You alluded to it earlier. We see the videos all the time of groups of people going into retail establishments, just grabbing armfuls of merchandise and leaving. And it's allowed to happen. In California, they have a law where you can't even arrest somebody if it's less than $900 worth of merchandise or something like that. And so you're condoning even these people to go in and do these things. 10 people go in, they each take $900 worth of stuff. That's $9,000 worth of stuff. And what do you think? What are they going to do with 50 pairs of Nikes? They're not going to wear them all, right? They're selling them.
Yeah, they're being paid pennies on the dollar to go in and grab whatever they can, and then they're going to go in and turn it in to whoever got them to go. And then there's going to be either an Amazon marketplace or someplace online where you're going to be able to buy really cheap stuff, and it's all this stuff that's been shoplifted. I mean, it's not sustainable when you have stores closing because they can't withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting, where you have your commercial property values going down, and down again. It's not sustainable. And you see the mayors are the ones that are the first people that are saying, we got to change course because this is terrible. When you have cities that you're going to have commercial buildings default on their loans and not able to pay their taxes, and you're going to have cities not be able to provide the level of services, and it's going to get worse. They're going to borrow money, and then we're going to have cities that are going to start defaulting. You see mayors calling it now because they see where the future is. And so they're starting to say, wait a minute, we're going down the wrong road. We need to do something. And until we get more of them doing that, I mean, here's the reality. I had a mayor tell me, until you have an alternative to the private industry bail system that has the same accountability, the same low failure to appear rate, you don't have an alternative. Mm-hmm. So all of these other simple release mechanisms, things that we're trying that we've never done before, that are absolute failures, are showing they're not an alternative to the private industry bail system. And so until you get one, you got to rely upon the private industry. And the left can't have that. So in their cities, they're getting rid of it and trying alternatives that we know don't work. And shock, they're getting the result that we knew they would get. And they're going, oh my God, how did this happen?
Yeah. And it all kinds of circles back to what this show is about. And that's the bail industry and the basically the release method they're doing without accountability for these people. And it's all kind of connected. If you brought up, we're talking about the massive retail theft. It seems like that has a real chance of escalating that to more violent activity.
Oh yeah.
The more you allow, you give an inch, they're going to take a mile. And so now they're stealing Nikes and cigarettes. And fortunately, not too often somebody gets hurt when this happens. Sometimes a criminal gets hurt when the store owner has had enough. But eventually, don't you think? I mean, is there anything that documents or that you've personally seen where it escalates into violence?
Well, I mean, let's make it real simple for our listeners. We're in an urban area, and in a given week, the courts in that urban area have 1,000 cases set for hearing during that week. The bail industry has a failure to appear rate of less than 10%. All of these simple release mechanisms have at least a 50% failure to appear rate. Right now in California, misdemeanors have an 80% failure to appear rate across the state. Harris County, which uses a similar method, has an 80% failure to appear rate according to harriscountycourtwatch.com. So every week you've got 1,000 people showing up for court. Okay, you have less than 100 people fail to show up under the private industry system, or you have 500 to 800 people fail to show up. And just imagine how that compounds after 3 weeks. You have 500 times 3 is 1,500, probably more because you had those 500 set for an additional hearing. So it just grows exponentially. And so if you've got 1,500 or 1,800 people who fail to appear for court, you've now got warrants and you're getting them arrested. You've created so much chaos. And you would have to have double the courts to be able to even address that versus less than 100 people, less than 300 people, with the private industry having an incentive to get them back on track as soon as possible. So it's an organized return versus just you've got to commit another crime because you got a warrant. They find the warrant, they get you arrested, and they take you to jail. So the private industry prevents this chaos from happening, which is what we're seeing in Chicago right now, what we're seeing in Illinois. And you wonder why is crime increasing just because we changed the type of release? There's a simple explanation of why. And to your question, once you've been arrested and you fail to appear, and then you get arrested and you get another simple release, and then you get another you get 17 failures to appear, and you get 17 simple releases, then you start kind of getting the mindset, well, they're not going to do anything to me.
Yeah.
What happens if they dismiss that case because you failed to appear and they can't do anything? Your case has to be put on hold. We don't show up. So they dismiss it. Well, that seems like a green light. I'm going to commit more crime. They didn't do anything to me last time. And you know what? This time I may make it a little bit bigger. That's why Yolo County found that even though we're talking about low-level offenses, they found on those offenses there was a 200% chance that greater chance that a person on simple release would create a violent offense in the next 18 months versus somebody on a private industry bail.
Oh man, and with that high of a no-show rate that you're citing, in some places as high as 80%. There's not they're not going to be able to track these people down. That they're going to get benched.
No.
The only way they get caught is if they get pulled over, or if they get caught for
right.
another crime or something like that. So basically, they commit a crime, they get released, and they're not going to get caught again for not showing, or then they don't show up, and then they're not going to get in trouble for that until they commit another crime and get caught again.
That's right. In August of 2022, I looked at the report in Harris County for misdemeanor courts. They do a report every month of all the cases that were disposed that month. Over 90% of them were dismissed. That means they're dismissing almost everything to prevent the criminal justice system from collapsing, because the conveyor belt is always moving forward. It's always adding the same number of cases on average. And so to prevent it from collapsing, in 2022 in August, they dismissed over 90% of the cases that were disposed in that month.
Man, oh man. So, we've talked, here's, I think, a large cause of this, underlying cause to a lot of our criminal activity, our lack of accountability. Of course, our politicians create a lot of the problems that they try to fix. But the bigger issue to me seems to be, and this is something that's been ongoing now for decades, and that is the breakdown of the nuclear family, that seems to be supported by the big government. Having a mother and a father at home and raising your kids and going to school, it almost seems to be looked down upon by the left. And it's to me generating a breakdown in society and values and morals and ethics that then, of course, is contributing to this. What do you I don't even know how you fix that other than just trying
we've been looking at, in our inner cities, everything you've talked about is, times 2, times 3, because when crime increases, it's going to increase exponentially in our inner cities. But so the family problem has been a problem for a long time in our inner cities. Mm-hmm. Education, dropout rate, finishing school, getting good teachers in our inner cities has been a problem for a long time in our inner cities. And then you've got the problem of drugs in our inner cities. And then add on that with, these riots and these protests and burning down businesses, economic opportunity has gone down in our inner cities because businesses have been burned down and people didn't return. Yeah. So all of those things are, I would say, the problems have been made worse by the government. And so now we have those same groups, the ones that have made all those situations bad or worse, are coming in and say, well, we've got the best idea to fix it. Now we're just going to have no accountability in the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system was the last hurrah for a lot of these people because we have someone's arrested for the first time. There's no chance they're going to be held in court. They're going to get their case dismissed or they're going to get probation. But as you get arrested more times, people start falling away. Your friends go away from you. And then, your family will still bond you out of jail. But ultimately, you can screw your family enough where you don't show up for court, you commit more crime. They have to pay for your problems that even they will leave you in jail. And those are the career criminals, and they need to stay in jail. We're finding that these, charitable bail funds, that's who they're bonding out of jail now, mm-hmm. because they're the ones that are contacting them and say, well, nobody will stand up for me anymore. Well, it's because you've got a track record that's 5 pages long saying that you're a career criminal. We have groups that are trying actively to disrupt our criminal justice system. This law firm that I mentioned, one I think is leading the charge. They will say to your face, well, we want you to feel safe, but the God's honest truth is if they have to pick between your safety or holding a murderer in court, they're going to say you can't hold the murderer in court. So when they say we feel your pain, true, but they're not willing to do anything about it because they don't want anyone to be able to hold people in jail. In fact, they call jail cages. And I'm like, how can we even have a debate or try to find common ground when you're using such poisonous language that is intended to cut off debate? That's where we are. I mean, I think that that's the goal and it's what these people want. And they want to sow chaos. And, Soros is behind a lot of these things from the DA perspective. And I heard the most interesting argument that for the first time that kind of explained it. It said, he makes a lot of money through arbitrage and he makes a lot of money when there's chaos. And so for the first time, I was like, could he be wanting to create chaos so he could make more money?
Sure.
That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, he's a businessman. That's the first explanation I ever heard of that made sense to why he would be doing these and pushing these policies.
Yeah,
it makes a lot more sense than crime's going up, so that we're going to double down.
Yeah, well, these people have no morals, and I think that a lot of them are flat out evil. I happen to believe that there's good and bad. I think there's evil in this world. I think there's demonic activity that's run amok in some people in some places, and it's it is a battle, and it is a war that we're fighting. So
what that tells us, there's no compromise. If they were there with good intentions, once they saw that they were not working, they would backtrack. They're not. And so you can't find a middle ground with these people because their middle ground is you can't hold anybody. So the only way to defeat them or defeat their policies is to replace them. And so that's why I keep saying we have to, until we get these two issues fixed, immigration and criminal justice reform, we just have to vote along party lines. We have to say, until you're going to change your policy, I'm not voting for you and I promise you they'll change overnight, but that's what it's going to take to fix this.
Yep. I watch, I keep in touch with a lot of podcasts and whatnot. That's where I get a lot of my news, a lot of my information. Dan Bongino is one of my favorites. And one of his sayings is always, how bad does it need to get? Eventually it will get bad enough where the public will demand change. And the only reason that we're not demanding change is it just has not gotten bad enough yet. And, this is a huge, huge issue, and it needs far more attention than what it's getting. Why do you think the media doesn't cover this more? Is it just not sexy enough for them?
No, I think it's a multitude of issues. That number one, they're adamantly scared to death that Trump's going to win presidency. I mean, you can see it in everything they're doing. So they're worried he's going to win re-election. Anything that would be perceived as helping him or helping the R's, because now that Trump is the new Hitler, there is no candidate on the right that's going to run for president that's not Hitler. That's you've already heard it on DeSantis. He's worse than Trump. We can't vote for him. So anybody running on the right is now going to be worse than Trump, period. I mean, you wait till, if the woman Haley if she gets traction, she will be destroyed because they can't have a woman on the right. That'll make it even worse.
Yeah, no, they're out for blood. I mean, absolutely. And I tell people all this all the time that they're like, oh, well, DeSantis can go in and do this and that. And, he's going to be more accepted. And I'm like, no, man, you don't understand. These people, they will destroy him. And he has so much more to lose. He's not independently wealthy.
But look at the report. I mean, look at the debate that DeSantis did with, the governor of California. DeSantis absolutely destroyed him.
Yes.
And so what did the press do? They, by and large, ignored it.
Yeah. And that's what they'll do. And the more you have to lose, I mean, he has a young family. I don't see it. I think Trump will be the nominee. Whether or not they can be successful in putting him behind bars or house arrest remains to be seen. I'm sure they'll make some.
But they're successful in doing that. I think that makes him more of a martyr, and there's people on the left that vote for him. I mean, I saw a report that he went to court one day and he drove through some, black communities, and they were standing out cheering him on for standing up. And so, I mean, that I think it's backfiring, and they, I mean, there's not any case that they're trying against him where they can kill him or they can say you're going to get the death penalty. But if they could, I think they would. I think
Oh,
they
sure
would
they would.
try,
Yeah, sure they would,
because
man.
that's where we are. I mean, I think all of these things you have to look at them and say those are intended to destroy him with the electorate, and it's now all about identity politics. If you just talked about crime and immigration, the left wouldn't stand a chance wouldn't even be close. So we have to talk about all these other issues. It's all about identity. It's all about, you can't vote for them because of your identity, and it's going to get worse. And it's going to get a lot worse. It's the worst election we've ever seen.
Oh, it's going to be, this is going to be an election cycle. Like, I mean, I tell people all the time, fasten your seatbelts, man. This is going to be like something you have never seen. We've never experienced what we're going to experience over the next 12 months. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. But we've seen a lot of places where they've tried these simple release methods, and they have started pulling back. They New York has rolled back their reforms 3 or 4 times now, but they have more to roll back, and the governor is trying to not roll back anymore. But as crime goes up, there's going to be a further push. You're going to see. I mean, that's probably going to be the reason why California ultimately turns, is because people can't stand crime anymore. I mean, this is a cycle that we've had before. In the 60s, we started feeling safe, so we started being more forgiving on crime, and we started seeing crime go up. And so we're repeating the same mistakes that we've had in the 60s. And what happened as a result of the 60s? We had a huge backlash. We had a war on crime. We got Ronald Reagan, probably one of the best presidents we've ever had.
Oh,
and if they're not careful on the left, we're going to have the same cycle repeat itself, which I think is a good thing. Getting tough on crime. We need to get tough on crime anytime, from the standpoint of pushing people to change their course of actions. Anytime somebody changes and becomes is willing to be a productive citizen, we need to show them mercy. But until that happens, we need to have crime. And people say, well, the jails are so overcrowded. We're the only country in the world that has so much people in jail. Where does everybody send their drugs? They send their drugs to the United States. So we have the most drugs in the world, and of course we're going to have the most people in jail. And until we have crime going down, we don't have enough jails, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, we have a population of 330 million people too. I mean, for a Western society, that's pretty substantial. And I would argue that there's more people in jail in China and Russia than there are in the United States, but we don't get real statistics from them. Do you want to talk a little bit about the organization that you're involved with, Professional Bondsmen of Texas? That's
Sure.
pbtx.com. A little bit about what that is, and I mean, I was able to peruse the website, but by the way, listen to a couple of your podcasts on there. Good stuff. Great information. If you want to take a deeper dive, go to this website. Check the little box at the top and go to the podcast section. You can catch Ken talking about lots of things. But what is a Professional Bondsman of Texas, Ken?
Well, it's a trade organization, and I am on their board of directors. I'm on their legislative team as well. We call ourselves the voice of the bail industry in Texas. So, really, we're the only ones that are, well, when we started this, we were the only ones that were giving the opposing argument to all these people that are pushing bad bail reform mechanisms or policies. And so we started doing a podcast as well. Our podcast is called The Bail Post. You can go to thebailpost.com, or you can go to pbtx.com. You can go to our blog where we highlight important stories in the criminal justice system. But you can also see our podcast where we, like he said, we deep dive into criminal justice issues. If you want to know what the New Jersey plan is, we have a podcast on it. So it's meant to be a resource to organizations or legislatures that are looking at these failed policies, and so you can get the full other side of the story. I mean, look at what's going on in Harris County, Texas. Harris County was mandated to do some stuff because of a settlement and a federal lawsuit in O'Donnell versus Harris County. The O'Donnell case has been reversed 6 or 7 times. The federal court has ruled it should have never been filed in federal court in the first place. And yet Harris County is still following this settlement, which has essentially been overturned and said should have never been filed. And it's because now it's just become a political issue. It's a left versus right issue. And it is a problem with public safety, but the politicians on one side of the spectrum are not willing to do anything other than say, I feel your pain. Well, we've been through that before, and feeling your pain isn't going to do anything about it, not going to get the result. So if you want to learn more, you can go to our website. We address these issues all the time. I mean, too much probably, but that's what we do. We highlight criminal justice issues. And thank you so much for having me to talk about them and highlight these issues today.
Oh, definitely, man. And thanks so much for coming on the show, Ken. You've been generous with your time. Please don't send me a bill. I know you attorneys can be expensive. But anyway, you've been generous with your time. Maybe we can do this again at some point in the future. Again, folks, that was Ken Good, bail attorney and board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. If you'd like more info, you can look them up on the socials, and their website is pbtx.com. Ken has a regular podcast posted there for those that want to take a deeper dive or, just to keep up on this topic, among others. Anyway, hey, thanks for tuning in. If you've just been listening on the podcast, make sure to check me out on rumble.com/the Nunn Report. You can see the video. You can see our beautiful old faces and all that stuff. I'm on all the socials at the Nunn Report, except Twitter, because I couldn't get so Twitter is at Nunn Report. Anyway, hey, thanks again for watching. And as always, until next time, may the odds be ever in your favor. Cheers.